Wind and waves may often lash Canada's Pacific coast, but safely tucked amongst the forested hills on the southern tip of Vancouver Island lies the village of Sooke. This is one of the oldest communities on the BC coast. It's the home of the picnic called All Sooke Day.
Once again, want to welcome you to All Sooke Day. We're proud to announce this is our 50th anniversary of a continually running logging sports. In fact, we lay claim right here in this little community of Sooke that we've got the longest running series of logging sports of any body, particularly on the northwest Pacific coast here. I was going to say the world, but somebody might dispute that. Time is ready. Contestants ready? 1, 2, go. Now these are 13-inch alder blocks they're cutting. They're using single-minute saws which weigh anything up to 5 pounds.
Let's go. Come on. Get at it. Let's go. Pick it up. Go, Ken. Pick it up. Keep it going.
I forgot to mention, this is for the Canadian Championship underhand jump. Ian Moratti is through. Also through. Ken Nelson is through.
From recollections, I believe I took the square timber chopping, which was an endurance contest, 7 years in a row. And I was really good at the axe throwing, which is a hobby, nice soft job. You see, a logger, he has a dangerous job, and he's got to keep his mind on what he's doing. And when he has a little break, you don't treat it as a joke, but you start to play around a little bit. And I used to toss my single-bitted axe from the felled tree over to the next tree, just for fun.
Be set right. We must put the knob right into the bell. It must be set properly. We'll check that out. Cross over, opposite log. Look at Harry go there. Right. I knew somebody would get quit. These guys will go to any length to get a good cool wetting off this time of the afternoon.
Some of the earliest logging sports at All Sooke Day were water events held on the river. Burling was the contest that Sooke's own native sons developed to world championship caliber. During the 1950s and 60s, the Wickham brothers, Jube and Dardy, dominated all competition for 13 years.
Well, my interest in Burling started when I saw the competitors at All Sooke Day, and in those days they were mostly the Indians, like the George boys and Tommy Nelson, and so I was fascinated. And I'd find a round log on the beach and practice. My brother Jube, he was younger, and when he got old enough, we used to practice together, and the more agile you were, the better you could do your job. And of course, I was booming logs in those days, and so it came natural. Like, I developed the ability to roll both ways, but my brother never did. He would only roll one way. And so he became very good at rolling backwards to sort of compensate for that. It had one advantage, that you didn't lose your balance, whereas I would turn and roll one way or roll the other way, and it made for an interesting show.
Find the top.
When they start to go, they're gonna go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There you go, you get your money in that.
All Sooke Day began as a big picnic. The folk in Sooke had always loved to while away a long, hot summer's day down at the flats by the water. Family and friends would gather to eat a huge picnic lunch and play games like tug-of-war, dory racing, foot races, and even horse racing. It was from this tradition that All Sooke Day was born in 1934. The Great Depression was hanging over the whole country like a perpetual rainy day. Sooke felt its touch as well. But most people here found enough work to make ends meet. Some of the men were in the woods logging and hauling the tall timbers. The great fish traps that operated in Sooke waters for over half a century continued to bring in rich harvests of salmon right through the Depression. People spoke of the hungry 30s, but in Sooke, small farms had been carved out of the dense forest to provide hay and fodder, fresh milk and eggs. Nearly every family had a garden and grew the finest vegetables. The town was still growing, and the good people of Sooke began to wish for a new and larger community hall. They said, why not throw a bigger picnic than ever and raise some money? We'll put on a real feast and a special show and invite people to come from all around. They proudly proclaimed this picnic the first annual celebration of the Progress of Sooke. Later it became All Sooke Day because all of Sooke took part and everybody gave freely of whatever they did best.
Sometimes I've seen it 2 months preparation before Sooke Day.
We start out getting the grounds ready, build the tables, put up tents. Everybody, you know, they were still working, so they had to volunteer some of their evenings.
And all the fish trap men, practically all of them, used to work up at All Sooke Day, cooking the fish, making the chowder and all that.
And the creamery sent out free ice cream.
And then we all had to make cakes to bring down, and we were always busy. Well, a community spirit because everyone worked.
Yes, but everybody worked. If you probably had 2 jobs. You might work over in the tea while the tea was on in the afternoon, then you'd go over and help in the salmon because that would be at supper time. And it was such a beautiful salmon and that, all free, and the ladies served it.
The Sooke Harbor Fishing and Packing Company and Todd's would donate the fish. And I think that was one of the big drawing cards that first started the people coming out to Sooke, you see, and then from then on it just grew.
They're local salmon from the straits out here. The local fish buyer buys them, and we get them off of him every year. The night before, like, we generally go down to the fish buyer, and the fish are split, and they're in ice. We rack them, tie them in the racks, and salt them. And then we came at 7:30 this morning and lit the fire and heated the ground up with bark, and then switched over to alder and did our thing. I guess originally this is the way the Indians cooked them, and they've refined it with the racks.
Well, we start off with the skin side. Depends on the size of the fish, but it goes for about 40 minutes. And then we roll them over to the flesh side. And about 15, 20 minutes just to seal the juice back in. Oh, well, around 6 beer and the fish is cooked.
Nowadays there aren't many big trees, but those days there were lots of big trees. The crew in that day was a head faller, second faller, and a bucker. Most trees you'd put springboards in to get above the pitchy part of the tree. The head faller and the second faller, they had axes, and they cut what we called an undercut in the tree, which pointed wherever you wanted to fall it. Fallers had a narrow-bladed axe, and it was quite a long blade, sharp at both ends. When you got your undercut practically finished, you can put that axe in with the blade in the cut, and you sight the handle out where you want the tree to go. And well, then after you get your undercut, you get your falling saw, and you swing around on your boards, and you cut across the back till the tree gets ready to go. And if the tree has a little bit tight, well, you have steel wedges, which we hammered in to open up the cut and free the saw blade. The back of the undercut, at right angles from that, would be where the tree should go. Don't say it always went there, but that's where it should go. Well, it was a good, healthy life.
I was following bucking all my life. And I won the springboard chop for 6 years straight.
Until Rupert beat him, I think.
And then Rupert beat me. Well, that was my fault. I went to work for the fish trap and I got so fat I ran out of wind.
The springboard chop takes a lot of experience. It takes a lot of accuracy. Well, I'm getting into the veteran contestant stage. I've been competing now for 30 years. I've always been more successful in the chopping events, particularly the springboard chop. I hold the world record in that for a 14-inch block. Well, I learnt to chop the springboards in New Zealand, and we were splitting a type of tree there called a red birch for fencing materials, and they had big flared-out butts, and we used to have to go up 2 or 3 boards to fall the trees, and I became proficient on the springboards. I felt at home there, and it's just like chopping off the ground.
And then when you fell that tree, well, then the bucker came along. He had a heavy 7-foot saw, and he'd measure the tree up and cut them into logs. Normally, he was a very powerful man. It's hard work, but they could just buck and buck and buck all day long, and it didn't seem to bother them. They get the nickname sawmill. First power saws were all 2-man saws. One man couldn't handle them. They were too heavy. In wasp season, the front man would go through a wasp nest and the back one would get all the wasps. The tug-of-war probably was one of the big attractions. We used to have a Sooke team, and there used to be a team from Elder Logging.
That night was tough on the hands. I remember once we pulled there for 20 minutes before we beat them. And I had a chunk of skin, about 4-bit piece right out of the center of my hand from hanging onto the rope. But we beat them. And one time there was a bunch that came from up at Duncan there, and they all weighed about a ton apiece. And they were going to pull us all over, and we hooked onto them, and we rocked them a little, and we got them rolling, and they came right over.
We had to train 6 weeks ahead of time. Plus, it took a good coach to coach a team properly, and we were quite proud of our team. We competed against Army, Navy, firemen, you name it.
They've always had nail driving. Well, they had all kinds of races for the women.
Ma Clark, as we called her, she just came by it naturally, a hard worker.
She won the nail driving for several years. Her husband died when the twins were quite small, and I suppose if there was any building or anything, she had to do it or something.
And some very surprising girls went into and did very well. People you'd never have thought could have hit a nail on the head.
What was your first connection with All Sooke Day?
Well, I guess when I won the baby contest. 1934.
For the last 32 years, I've been in charge of the All Sooke Day Baby Show. I took over from a Mrs. Roberson. She started the first baby show in Sooke. I think that was in the 1930s. The most babies we've ever had in one of these shows is 125 babies. This year we had 88 babies, and we have 2 doctors judging this year, but it was a very difficult year. There were so many beautiful babies.
Well, the beef has been prepared the day previous. We flavor it with whole garlic and salt, black pepper. My father started cooking the meat, and I've just sort of taken over. The beef is wrapped up tight in sacks. It's tied with wire, and is dumped in the river. This is to soak the sacks so they won't burn before we get them covered up. We start the fire Friday morning. We're trying to make a bed of coals. We rake the coals out of the fire pit. Then we throw the sacked meat, which is now soaking wet, into the pit. Rake the coals back over it. And then an eager crew throws sand over the whole works before it has time to burn. That's it for Friday. Saturday, we pull the first one out whenever the cafeteria is ready to serve. The method is referred to as the Leechtown method, brought to this district by the Leechtown miners.
The Leech River Gold Rush of 1864 was an exciting episode in Sooke's early life. The first All Sooke Day commemorated Leechtown, perhaps hoping somehow to revive the riches of those times.
They used to have 2 go around with an old donkey and try to drag everybody in to stake a claim in the gold rush, and so it was lots of fun.
It was a money-making thing. They had little wooden cedar pegs, and they'd pay 50 cents for it and go out and drive it in wherever you thought it would be lucky.
The tombola was just a giant raffle. The prizes were always good. The merchants in Victoria were wonderful to the people of Sooke. Everybody would say, yes, I'll give $5. Yes, I will give a silver plate. Yes, I will give a cedar chest. It was one of the few methods they had of making money for the home.
They talked about it for several years before they finally built the hall, and it was a question of money. And the first go off, we had no money, so they went to the lumber yards. It was in the 30s when they were darn glad to have a sale, and we got the lumber what we needed. After the All Sooke Day, they was paid.
We'd never have had that hall if it hadn't been for Sandy Helgeson's spirit. Because any community meeting you ever attended, Sandy got up and his dream was to have a new hall for Sooke.
We had good dances in Sooke in those days.
You mean you were younger?
I think they have more fun than people do nowadays, just from hearing them talk.
If it hadn't been for All Sooke Day, people wouldn't know anything about what logging was like in the old days. It is something that needed to preserve the logging as it was.
Spar trees, I haven't seen one for years. Most of them got those steel spars now. They can move them around and rig them up in a couple hours and they're going. Where I used to rig up a big fir tree and that, it'd take them 2 or 3 days to rig them up. And then they'd pick a big tree, you know, and a good clean one, and the tallest one they could get. Some of them used to have them up at 200 feet high.
It was something not too many people done. Once you got so you could do it, then you were more or less, in those days, you were guaranteed of a job, too. You have a problem climbing those trees because of the heavy bark on them. It's not like the ones at All Sooke Day where they're all peeled and you don't do as much slipping. A lot of people just couldn't stand the height. That was more reason a lot of them didn't do it. Like every time you topped a tree, it would, you know, it would bounce you around different. Then you always had the best view. You did a lot of sliding coming down, like especially on those big trees with the heavy bark. If you went fast, you'd have a whole boot full of bark, and next thing you'd be sliding down on your chin.
The donkey had to come and with all the equipment before they could rig it. Big donkeys, oh, some of them huge things. It was a big steam engine, all geared. The lines went up from the donkey up to the top of the spar tree, and then the chokers were set on the logs, and the donkey pulled them into the landing where they can be loaded.
I think there are so few climbers around because the sport itself is not done on a regular day-to-day basis out in the woods anymore. It's quite dangerous because once you get to the line or to the bell, you've got to have enough strength to get down safely without slipping. And if you slip and you're tired, you can really hurt yourself. There's no way of stopping yourself. There's a fellow here today that held the world record last year. His name is Ed Johnston. He'll be climbing. And he can go to the bell and down in well under 30 seconds. And he used to hold the world record 26:9, which is absolutely phenomenal. You hardly think it's even possible.
I remember all those friends at those All Sooke days. 50 years of salmon, beef, and fun. And I remember all the cheers for all that grandstand logging. The greatest picnic still, the greatest one.
You just do this because you live in Sooke, that's all. You get assigned to it, and that's the way it is. Cleaning tables? I think this is about my 10th year now. They've promised me a promotion someday, but hasn't come yet. Oh, I like being out and walking around, meeting people. I see all my old friends every year. It's good. And there's no hurry about it either.
Well, actually, as far as I was concerned, it was just a day of work, really. and sometimes, by the time you got finished at night, you were just about ready to be sick if you were over there in that smoke.
We have 76 competitors here today. They're from all over. I think it's just great. They're all the same fellas coming back all the time. You know, say hi there, you know, nice to see you again. It's great, yeah. I think it's the people.
I made it the first time in 1934. Ate too much ice cream and drank too much lemonade.
We've donated our services as free community work. We love the people and we just like to help, and we do our best.
I remember all those friends at those All Sooke days. 50 years of salmon, beef, and fun. I remember all the cheers